I certainly hope my Democratic colleagues can let us move forward on this. We're going to stay all night until we get the President's chairman of the Joint Chiefs confirmed. Now, look, I know there was some concern about removing General Brown, C.Q. Brown. I actually really like General C.Q. Brown. I thought he did a good job. I've publicly stated a number of times that he served his country very well. But here's the deal. The President of the United States is entitled to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs that he wants. And you look at history, senior military commanders on Democrat side, on Republican side, if the president doesn't feel comfortable with them, he has the right to remove them and move on. That's just our history. That's happened with Democrats. George W. Bush wasn't comfortable. General Peter Pace, he's a Marine. I happen to respect him a lot. He said, hey, I'm not comfortable, I'm moving to another chairman. President Obama fired two very senior four-star generals inside of 2 years. One was General McChrystal, one of the most seasoned warriors, in a generation of warfighters. And he removed him. And so President Trump clearly had the authority to remove General Brown. He has now put forward General Kane, who, by the way, everybody on the committee, Armed Services Committee, thought he did a great job. He's going to get a really big vote here. So why are we delaying it? I don't know. Doesn't make any sense to me. President deserves a senior military advisor. That's what the chairman of the Joint Chiefs is, his senior military advisor. President needs to feel comfortable with that person. That person's actually out of the chain of command. And we've seen throughout history that when the president doesn't feel comfortable, he can remove one general and bring in another one. And that's what's happened here, and we should confirm General Kane immediately. I think he's going to do a really, really good job. Matter of fact, Mr. President, I've interviewed, sat down with, served under hundreds of flag officers. General Kane is one of the most impressive I've ever met. So we need to get on with it. And, there's these press stories about, why President Trump removed General Brown. I think it's just because he wanted to have a general who he trusts and feels comfortable with, and that's exactly his right as the commander-in-chief. So we should move on. General Kane's going to get a very, I think, significant bipartisan vote. He should. And if the minority leader wants to object, we'll just grind it out all night and get it done.
I wonder if I could reclaim my time to ask my distinguished friend from Alaska a question.
The senator from Alaska has the floor, and he can yield for a question.
I yield to my good friend from Mississippi.
Yes, that's correct. Well, I would then ask my distinguished friend from Alaska, isn't it a fact that General Kane, time and again, has demonstrated his aptitude and leadership abilities while actually deployed in combat zones, leading service members in Iraq and Syria, and while serving in various special operations force units, and also in the intelligence community, and that he ran some of our most secretive programs for the security of Americans?
That's absolutely my good friend from Mississippi. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs, by the way, the chairman of the Armed Services Committee, by the way, a senator who knows probably more about the military than anyone else here, has it exactly right. General Kane has this breadth of experience, not just a fighter pilot with thousands of hours, combat hours in flight, but has worked very closely with our intel services, has very significant combat experience in Iraq and Syria. Very interestingly, Mr. President, and the chairman of the Armed Services Committee knows this, has private sector experience. And you would say, well, why does that matter? It actually matters a lot because of our military and the need to integrate our very powerful private sector. So he brings a wealth of experience that, to be honest, in my 10 years in this position as a U.S. Senator on the Armed Services Committee, in my 30 years in the Marine Corps, I have never seen a general that brings it all together, so I think he's going to be outstanding and exceptional.
If the gentleman would further yield, I just wondered if the gentleman would yield to the distinguished minority leader to ascertain how this matter is going to be resolved differently if we wait until tomorrow.
I yield.
The gentleman has the floor. Perhaps he would do so.
Mr. President, I would yield to the distinguished minority leader, and maybe having him watch this distinguished debate between me and the chairman of the Armed Services Committee has convinced him to bow to the inevitable, and that's the confirmation of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs.
Senator from Alaska has the floor. Senator from New York is not seeking recognition.
Maybe this minority leader will explain why he's objecting, given that we just laid out very cogent, strong reasons that we need to move forward on confirming the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Right now, it's a very dangerous world. Why would we wait? I'm curious on what the minority leader says. Now, I yield the floor if he has an answer.
Senator, yield the floor.
Senator yields the floor to answer that inquiry that I asked you.
The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Alsobrooks.
I just want the American people who are watching, those who care about our national security, the chairman of the Armed Services Committee just had a colloquy here on the floor talking about why we needed to move the chairman of the Armed Service, or the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, to get confirmed on the Senate here. And I and the chairman of the Armed Services Committee respectfully asked the question of the minority leader, Democratic minority leader, why are you blocking this? And you may have seen he just walked off the floor. He didn't answer. I don't know if he has an answer. If he has an answer, it sure would be good to hear what the answer is, because we need President Trump's chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff confirmed. And I bet he gets a strong bipartisan support in terms of his confirmation, because he's very qualified. And yet, without any explanation, the minority leader of the U.S. Senate just said, I object, and he walked off the floor. I hope the press reports on that. Holy cow, that's kind of big news. And if we have to be here all night, jamming down on them to get the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff confirmed, because our country needs it during a very dangerous time, a general who's immensely qualified, then that's what we're going to do. But it sure would be easier to just agree with us, start moving on the vote, and get this highly qualified general confirmed as President Trump's chairman of the Joint Chiefs. But what you just witnessed, for anyone watching, the American people watching, was a non-debate. My good friend from Mississippi and I were describing why we need to move this forward. The minority leader of the U.S. Senate, who has the power to do it, just said, I object. Normally, on the Senate floor, when someone objects, they explain why. But he didn't want to do it. Just walked off the floor. So that's what we just witnessed. A little bit unusual, particularly when it comes to a confirmation that's so important. There's very few confirmations that the U.S. Senate does that are more important than confirming the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And I guess the Democrats are going to block it for now, and we will go all night to make sure President Trump has his principal senior military advisor, which he needs during these dangerous times. I yield the floor.